Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, insight and analysis on that most important of the least important things, football. I'm Ronan Murphy and I'm back with Duncan Castles for another week of fun and frivolity, I think we might say, and a bit of transfer news too. Welcome, Duncan.
Thanks for having me back, Ronan. I'm surprised we haven't had the League of Ireland update at the start of this podcast, given the big news about Drogheda being kicked out of European competition for multi-club ownership. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so Drogheda United are kind of a historic club and they have the same owners as other clubs. So that's usually not a problem for the likes of Red Bull. If you remember, Salzburg and Leipzig have played many times in Europe. But no, when you're in the League of Ireland, Drogheda United have been kicked out because they finished lower in the table compared to their other club in their big club family as we have these days. So yeah, they're not back in Europe for next year. And because UEFA, to get into Europe, you have to apply for a UEFA license to play in Europe, and no other club in the League of Ireland applied for a license as a backup plan in case this might happen. So we have one club fewer in Europe next year. So I think the coefficient points are still being split as if there was 4 clubs in Europe next year. Yeah, so it's a disaster all around, but sure, what else would you expect? But that wasn't the biggest League of Ireland news this week. Damien Duff walking out in Shelbourne. That was the biggest news. Damien Duff, the very quiet player back in the day when he used to be interviewing him, has turned into a bombastic manager who loves making explosive statements in the media and throwing his players under the bus. And the last thing he did, despite winning the league last year at Shelbourne, is threw his players under the bus, said that they need to train more, that they should follow his example and have a 3-hour siesta in the afternoon. Just fine if you're a millionaire like Damien Duff, but maybe not so fine if you're a League of Ireland player. So he got all the players together, basically said nothing to him. I'm gone. Goodbye, lads. See you later. So big drama from the former Chelsea winger.
Not walking out to take a job in the Premier League then?
No, there's speculation, obviously, that he could be a right-hand man at Brentford, which we'll talk about later. But no, that seems to be just optimism from Irish people, or putting 2 plus 2 together to make 26 at the moment. So I suppose we'll get into the nitty-gritty that isn't the future of Drogheda United in Europe or the future of Damien Duff. Arsenal is the big talking point at the moment. They're in the market for a centre forward. We spoke about it on last week's show, and there was plenty of kind of fallout and follow on from that. And so, yeah, you're going to keep us in the loop, Duncan.
In the market for everything, I think, at the moment. We should start us off by saying it's a real about turn in Arsenal's policy of maintaining a squad, in that Mikel Arteta last season wanted to go and work with a tight squad, small squad, because he thought that would give him the optimum chance of winning the Premier League. Proved to be wrong. Whole host of injuries, also suspension issues, and he's changed his stance and wants a big squad, and they're going about it in all kinds of areas. We'll talk some more about the signings they've made or close to making, and others that they're targeting. But let's focus on that striker situation that we've discussed. Victor Gyokeres' position in detail in last week's pod. Talked about how he's basically told Sporting that he's not going to play or train for them again unless they let him go at the price of 60 million euros plus 10 million of bonuses that was agreed at the end of last season's transfer window. Big fight with the president there. But he's one of 4 candidates to be the new striker at Arsenal. We can add an extra name in this week. Obviously, Benjamin Sesko has been a key figure in their list of targets. We told you last week that one of the issues with Sesko is that Sesko has been asking for a release clause to be added to a contract that he would sign with Arsenal, which is something that Arsenal are not keen on for very obvious reasons. Ollie Watkins, Aston Villa striker, who's been a regular and reliable source of Premier League goals for several seasons now. Arsenal supporter. Arsenal explored signing him in January. Aston Villa said, no, you will not be taking our key forward at that point. But Watkins I'm told would be open to a move to Arsenal. Were that to emerge, you would like to continue playing for a club in the Champions League, but play for a club with the possibility of winning the Premier League title if Arsenal were to offer Aston Villa a sum that was acceptable to them. And then there's one more name that I've become aware of this week, which may come as a surprise, which is Nicholas Jackson, the Chelsea striker, who's had an interesting time in his 2 years at Chelsea. Scored 24 goals and 10 assists in 65 Premier League appearances across the 2 seasons, but never really nailed down his place as a starting striker. Chelsea always been looking for either adding someone else in that position or replacing him totally. They do not. Chelsea say they're not actively looking to sell Jackson in this window, but he's not one of the untouchable figures within their squad. So were a big enough offer to come in, they would consider selling him. Estimated transfer value of €65.7 million in the SciSports analytics at present, which is roughly double what Chelsea paid to take him from Villarreal 2 years ago. I think we all know what he offers. Certainly a great deal of pace, but also propensity for a daft red card, which may be why Arsenal think he could be a good fit to their squad. The guidance I have on where Arsenal are on this is this broad range of options is deliberate. They want to ensure that they get a centre forward for Arteta in this window and don't fail like they did last summer. They will do one of these deals. They're telling the representatives of the players involved that what it will come down to is the deal that they believe makes the best sense to the club, dependent on the financial terms they can secure with the player. And with certain players such as Gyokeres, the personal terms are already agreed, and what they can secure with the selling club. And then players like Gyokeres have a disadvantage of age, 27, and it is very much best deal on all parameters. Once all parameters are assessed, they're trying to get one of them in the door, and nothing is settled as yet. We know Gyokeres desperately wants to go there. Arsenal is the first choice for him. He's resisting Juventus. He has actively resisted Ruben Amorim, this previous manager at Manchester United. Arsenal is where he wants to go, and he's pushing Sporting very hard to make that deal happen, but no definition on exactly which forward it will be as yet.
Yeah, and none of those forwards will be cheap. You obviously mentioned that Nicholas Jackson, if they were to go for him, Chelsea would only sell for the right price, and Chelsea have already brought in his replacement. So you can see why it will be on the cards for a Jackson move, and we've seen moves from Chelsea to Arsenal before. It's not one of these Rangers to Celtic ones. It's not one of these controversial switches anymore, and yeah, it could feasibly happen. The only thing is, like you said, he's a bit of a red card magnet, and he'd missed the first game of the season, so Arsenal would take a while to get going if they were to sign him.
Yeah, I don't think he's the perfect solution for Arsenal. I think he's an unfinished player. You'd want development from both from a sporting perspective and from an emotional perspective from him. But as I say, they want to ensure that they get someone in this window, and a deal can be done with Chelsea if the price is correct. As a deal can be done with Sporting if the price is correct for Sporting, but Sporting have shifted the goalpost. The offer from Arsenal to Sporting, as we said last week, 55 million plus 10 million, which is 5 short of what Gyokeres believes he'd agreed with the club to be allowed to leave this summer, but 15 million euros short of what Sporting president Federico Varandas is now asking for. Other positions, they're in the process of trying to sign Christian Mosquera from Valencia, 20-year-old Spanish under-21 international, right-footed centre-back. Ball-playing centre-back who's relatively quick and very much seen as bring him in and have him as cover for Saliba and Gabriel Magalhães as the two first-choice centre-backs. And estimated transfer value of 13.9 million euros there. Valencia, a relatively easy club to deal with in Spain. I think there's a very good chance that Mosquera will end up being an Arsenal player. They have concluded a deal for Martin Zubimendi, the Spain international, overpaying the release clause in his contract to take the fee to 65 million euros, but that allows Arsenal to spread it out over several season payments instead of all in one go. They have Kepa Arrizabalaga joining from Chelsea for a defined fee of £5 million after his strong season as Bournemouth's first choice last season on loan. And they are going to take Christian Nurgo, the Brentford captain, having stepped in very rapidly and agreed very quickly a deal with Brentford for a player who will move into the squad as an alternative to Thomas Partey, who leaves having failed to agree a new contract with the central midfielder. Interestingly, our SciSports analytic give you this analysis of where a player fits into any particular squad, and they assess him as being a rotation player for Arsenal, 17th best player in the current squad if you take his past season analytics against the players in Arsenal's squad last season, and Partey rates as 13th. That it's a very pragmatic deal. It's a 31-year-old who has produced consistent performances in the Premier League. They know exactly what they're getting from Nurgo, and they also went in and gave Brentford a deal that was impossible for them to turn down. Brentford really can't say to a 31-year-old player who's getting an offer from a club competing for the Premier League title that there's any way that his career is going to develop in any particular fashion. He'll have a better options down the line. So they accepted £10 million, rising to £15 million. And I think quite interesting in the way that Arsenal have negotiated there, in that 2 years ago they extracted David Raya from Brentford, and that was a really complex process where they tried to get the deal done on the cheap, and eventually Brentford secured a large guaranteed fee, sending the player on loan with basically an obligatory option to buy Raya, having sorted out a deal for Raya to go to Bayern Munich and forcing Arsenal's hand on that. I think Arsenal learned a lesson there about dealing with Brentford, and have done this very clean, very quickly, and strengthened even in a backup position. And we've seen Jurriën Timber giving an interview recently and asked about what he expected to happen in Arsenal's summer window, and he said it will definitely be a busy one for Arsenal. I think there'll be a lot of players because we had so many injuries last season, and we're seeing exactly that. And I don't think they'll be finished even once that striker's in, because they want a left winger to upgrade in Gabriel Martinelli, and I've been looking at players like Rodrigo from Real Madrid, whose future there is not decided, and Bradley Barcola of Paris Saint-Germain, which I think will be a very difficult deal to do. Paris Saint-Germain don't want to sell. Barcola has recently changed agents, and the new agent has been pushing his name around European clubs, I think with the perspective that he will try to secure a better contract for Barcola in the coming season.
Yeah, we often see this, that the new agent, when you get a new agent, you need your new agent to look busy and be busy. You often see once a player changes agents that there's a lot more talk about them in the market, either to force a transfer or force a new contract at the club, get more money for their client. Because when you start any new job, I think all our listeners will remember, you want to make a good impression at the start. You don't want to be twiddling your thumbs and chasing the boss around, asking the boss what you're meant to be doing. So that could be one of those. But it's going to be hard to find a left winger, because we see other clubs in the market for one. Bayern Munich are in the market for for one at the moment, and they're being linked with similar names, and there are limited names in each of these markets, like the striker market, but Arsenal seem to be doing clever business elsewhere, and signing a 31-year-old midfielder mightn't kind of set the world alight for Arsenal fans, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to get over the line, because we've seen it at Liverpool with Taro Endo. People were kind of wondering, who's this guy, before they signed him, and it proved to be a kind of magnificent deal, because all Liverpool fans will now say 15 minutes to go, bring on Endo, and that's the match won for them. Shut up shop, and that's the kind of player you need to win titles, as well as these young, exciting players. You need the kind of veteran astuteness in midfield too. Veterans like ourselves, I suppose.
Look, Arteta wants this bigger squad. It very much looks like they're trying to cover all the bases for him. Obviously, you wait to see how many of the deals they eventually complete, but we're still early in the window. And they're doing things like getting a backup central midfielder in and paying basically the highest price you could pay for a 31-year-old, I think, in that position. You mentioned other left wingers. The obvious one with Arsenal was Nico Williams, who they've been chasing since last summer, and we should say that Nico Williams has now agreed personal terms with Barcelona, and is expected to go there, with Barcelona paying the €60 million release clause for the Spain winger, and that's why Arsenal are having to look elsewhere in that position.
Yeah, he was their first choice for a while, but Williams only wants to go to Barcelona. Bayern Munich even kind of tried to turn his head with a big offer late in the game, but if a player like that wants Barcelona and Barcelona can afford said player, that's usually what happens. And we'll have to see who else Arsenal can sign.
The Transfers podcast is running an audience survey at the moment. If you have a few minutes to fill it in, please do, and give us your thoughts on the show and guide us in ways in which we can improve it and bring you better content going forward. The link is in the show notes and also on our social media platforms.
One player Arsenal are signing is from Brentford, and we teased it earlier, but Brentford, they have their own kind of worries coming in, and the worry coming in, or maybe won't be a worry for them, is the new coach, Thomas Frank, as we know, after Spurs. He's gone to Spurs, and they're going with a relatively untried and untested coach. It's going to be an exciting one for Irish fans looking from the outside.
Yeah, look, this tells you, I think, quite a lot about Brentford as a club. They are unconventional. They're different. The reason that they've got into the Premier League, the reason that they're entering a fifth straight season in the Premier League, is that they operate in a different fashion. And you mentioned Thomas Frank being picked up by Tottenham. Tottenham very clear that he was their first choice to replace Ange Postecoglou. Thomas Frank started at Brentford as an assistant coach and was kind of developed within the club before taking over as manager and being the one that took them into Premier League and kept them there. And Brentford, in looking at a replacement for Thomas Frank, and this is something that they had been aware could happen for at least a year now, and had been preparing for it, interviewed a lot of candidates and a lot of kind of hot names in terms of younger coaches in European football. Kieran McKenna was an obvious one, the Ipswich Town manager who various clubs tried to hire last summer, and he decided to stay with Ipswich. Brentford decided against appointing him. They had a conversation with Davide Ancelotti before the end of the season to see whether he would be a good fit to give him his first full coaching job, and they decided against that after an initial conversation. Another individual they spoke to was Francesco Farioli, who's just 36 years of age, used to work with Roberto De Zerbi, was Nice coach, and then took over Ajax last season and did a very good job of getting them back to the status you'd expect and getting them back into the Champions League. Almost won them the title, but actually managed to lose a 9-point lead with 5 games to play, and then decided at the end of the season that he wanted to step away from 2 years of contract at Ajax to find a better fit for him. If you talk to people at Ajax, they'll say he's a very demanding coach. If you look at his own interviews, he says, I'm a very demanding person, and that he wants to find the right club that's willing to fight alongside him. Brentford could have had a strong chance, I understand, of appointing Farioli if they decided to go down that line. But instead, they went for Keith Andrews, who was already in the club, had been there for a year, working as set-piece coach to Thomas Frank, and praised for the work he's done in that role. Brentford conceded just 3 goals from set pieces last season, which was the lowest total in the Premier League, and actually 3 less than any other Premier League team, Manchester City being the second best in that perspective, and improved on previous seasons, in that they'd conceded 9 in 23, 24 and 12 in the preceding 2 seasons. One thing you should be aware of when Brentford took this decision to promote from within was it was probably their intention to promote from within from the very start. They had Justin Cochrane as Thomas Frank's assistant. He had been at Brentford since 2022, and the idea with Cochrane was to develop him within the club and have him there as the replacement in situ when and if and should Thomas Frank leave. What stymied that for Brentford was that Cochrane decided he preferred to go with Frank to be assistant at Tottenham Hotspur rather than pursue the Brentford job. There are a few reasons for this. One of them is because of personal reasons. Cochrane lives near Tottenham's training ground. He has 3 young kids. It makes his personal life easier to be an assistant and be close to the training ground. Also because he had been at Tottenham in the past, and he took that decision to stay with Frank, who has taken 2 more of Brentford's backroom staff with him, in head of athletic performance Chris Haslam and tactical analyst Joe Newton. And what that meant was that Brentford had not only lost their coach, they'd lost a big chunk of the support training staff of a group which had always been a kind of collegiate effort. If you look at the way Thomas Frank talks about his management, he does not set himself up as being an individual figure who has total control, who runs every aspect of the football club. He's very honest that that's not the way in which he operates. And Brentford have liked having a coach who works as part of a team and will follow their decisions when it comes to recruitment in particular, which is fundamental to a club with a limited budget, which has to sell players to survive in the top league. So why take Keith Andrews, who's never been a senior coach before? It's because he was already in the building, because they have liked what they've seen from him in that year, and because they feel like they're in a position where there's been too many changes. They've lost too many of their staff in one go. They realise that they're highly likely to lose Brian Mbeumo. Obviously, the captain has been sold to Arsenal, as we just discussed, and there's nothing they could do to prevent that from happening. So, therefore, the decision is take someone you trust, get as much continuity as possible, minimise the number of changes, and focus on keeping the club in the Premier League in what they expect to be a challenging season for them because of the scope of change that's been forced upon them this summer.
Yeah, so it's going to be a difficult difficult path for Keith Andrews to trod, and they don't have Cochrane coming in, and so life is a highway, as Tom Cochrane would have sang back in the 90s. Yeah, but Keith Andrews, from his time at Ireland, if you don't listen to former Republic of Ireland manager and a two-time European Cup winner as a player, as he always likes to remind us, Martin O'Neill. If you don't listen to Martin O'Neill, Keith Andrews is highly thought of elsewhere, and he was highly thought of when he was a player under Giovanni Trapattoni in Ireland and in the Premier League. I think Ireland would kill for a midfielder like him these days. We don't have any midfielders playing at his level in the Premier League when he was playing. But as a coach under Stephen Kenny, he was highly thought of, because Stephen Kenny, for all his faults as a manager of Ireland, maybe it was a job too soon for him at the time, the people he brought in around him seemed to have gone on to have exceptional careers, or better careers as coaches since they left Ireland. Damien Duff, like we mentioned at the start of the show, he was worked under Stephen Kenny for a while. He's went on to coach in Scotland, and he's won the League of Ireland. He's had a good start. Keith Andrews is now going to be the Brentford manager. John Eustace is the Derby County manager. He worked under Kenny. And Anthony Barry, he's now the assistant to Vincent Kompany at Bayern Munich. He's been with Belgium after he was with Ireland. So Stephen Kenny, he mightn't have got the best results as a manager out of the Ireland national team, but he really knew how to hire coaches. So Brentford obviously see the same thing in Keith Andrews that Stephen Kenny saw. Anytime I've spoken to Keith, he's always been a very personal guy, a very open guy. He's kind of honest, and maybe sometimes his bluntness is what kind of can affect people, and might have affected Martin O'Neill when O'Neill was Andrews' Ireland manager, and Andrews was kind of hinting to the media that at that time he didn't believe Ireland were doing good enough work on set pieces, or weren't kind of setting up in the way that they should be, or putting enough effort into matches. So I have full faith in that he will put kind of everything he has. He'll be a meticulous coach, and I think that's why Brentford have gone for him, because they've seen that that's the way he approached being the set piece coach, and like the stat you said, it worked for them well so far, so hopefully it can continue this season in the Premier League. But like you said, it's going to be one of massive change on and off the pitch for the club, so it could be a difficult season for them.
Yeah, as I say, they're unconventional, but they're not prepared. They're not scared of making unconventional decisions that others will question. And hiring a coach who has no experience as a manager, when you've lost someone of the status of Thomas Frank, it is an unconventional decision, but they are prepared to back themselves in these things, and they generally get them right. So if I was putting a bet on now about Brentford managing to stay up this season, I think I'd take those odds.
Yeah, I would too, and hopefully they won't be dragged into a relegation battle like Thomas Frank's new club were last season, and the other club that we love talking about and people love listening to, Manchester United. Other news that we have to bring you is that we have YouTube membership. As many of our listeners will know, that you can also watch us on YouTube. Now you can become a member and get special treats for yourself. So if you want to sign up for that, please do. And we'd love your support, and we always love your support listening and watching. It keeps us going and keeps us entertained. You mentioned that Man United are making move for Brentford's biggest name, and is that any closer, or what's progress there? Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, look, we talked last week about Manchester United's offer for Mbeumo not having reached the level that Brentford expect. There's been a fair amount of reporting on that again this week. People saying that an agreement was in place in the last couple of days, and that a medical had been penciled in. The guidance I have is that is not the case at present, that the current offer from Manchester United, the realistic value, i.e. guaranteed plus bonuses that could realistically be expected to be triggered during the course of Mbeumo's career at Manchester United is over £60 million. However, Brentford have had as an asking price from the beginning that they want £70 million guaranteed for the player. And so far they haven't shifted from that line. They've highlighted that Mbeumo outperformed Matheus Cunha last season, and pointed out that Manchester United have just paid Wolverhampton Wanderers €75 million or £62.5 million to take Cunha. And if you indeed compare the performance, Brentford aren't wrong with that in highlighting that. Mbeumo 20 goals in 38 Premier League appearances last season with 8 assists. He was 4th in the Premier League after Mohamed Salah, Alexander Isak and Erling Haaland. He played every single minute of the season for Brentford. Whereas Cunha, who's slightly older, couple of months older, 12 goals and 7 assists from 32 games for Wolves, and some disciplinary issues, not just with officials, but even with his own coach. So you can see Brentford's argument there. And Mbeumo has been a consistent performer in the Premier League for several seasons. And they also are in a position where they do not have to sell. Mbeumo wants to go. United are confident that they are his first choice, but there are other clubs in the Premier League, as you pointed out, who are looking for players in this position. Newcastle United making offers in this position this week. Tottenham Hotspur want a right winger, and obviously you have that relationship between Thomas Frank and Mbeumo. So Brentford are in a position where they can hold on this. He has 1 year left of contract and a single season option. So they basically got 2 years there on the deal. And I think their stance is one in which they're saying, you pay us the right money, you get the player. But until you pay us the right money, you don't. And United have gone quite early on this, and they've allowed a lot of press to build up around it. The idea that Mbeumo definitely wants to go there, and we'll see how the negotiations go. But Brentford have established themselves as a club who are not easy to deal with in the transfer market, in the sense of if you give them unrealistic offers that they don't feel are correct, they will not go with them, and they will sort out ways in which they achieve what they feel is the proper valuation of the player, as they did with David Raya when he went to Arsenal. And Raya, remember, only had a year left in his contract, as they did with Ivan Toney when they sold him to Saudi Arabia, again having just a year in his contract. So it's an interesting test of where this new Manchester United recruitment team are in terms of picking up a player they've now flagged up to be one of their top targets for Ruben Amorim's rebuild.
Yeah, and if Brentford look at Manchester United past dealing, they'll be like, yeah, Man United dealing before, it was give us 90 million for Anthony. No, we're not paying 90 million. Give us 90 million for Anthony. No, we're not paying 90 million. Here's 90 million. So yeah, it's that kind of approach that we've seen in the past from Man United. So Brentford are right to hold firm, and they know the value of their player. He will continue to be valued at that price, and more than likely they'll end up paying what Brentford want. Man United, if they want him, that's what they're going to have to pay. They obviously might work out some sort of add-ons or bonus structure or whatever to kind of make up for how they're paying the fee, but you would imagine that Brentford are going to get what they want, because that's what they want and that's how they operate. And we've said when talking about them, they are clever operators. They operate a bit different from different other clubs in the Premier League. Maybe we've mentioned before, Todd Bowley has tried to come in and revolutionise how football teams in England operated and wanted to make them more American, but maybe he should have looked to Brentford and operated a bit more like that, because they seem to be one of the smartest clubs in English business.
The transfer market is fundamental to Brentford. They have to maximise the income from the players they sell. They're frequently, or most of the time, they're buying players to develop, to sell on. with the principal buying market being higher status or wealthier Premier League clubs. So they want to make it clear, every time they do a deal, they want to make it clear to the other Premier League clubs that they don't get messed around in the market. If you come with an appropriate offer for a player, they're prepared to sell that player, which is something that they also will communicate to the players when they're coming into the club, that it's a development move, and if they develop correctly, and if the right price is offered for them down the line, then they'll get to move on to the next stage of the career. But the other side of that is don't sell at less than valuation, and always be seen to be what you've just described them as canny operators in the market. Look, Antony, obviously that's a different recruitment team and a different set of negotiators made that mistake, but you don't have to look very far back to see that the current recruitment team at Manchester United haven't been operating optimally. I mean, you've got a situation at the present where they have Marcus Rashford, who a year ago would have been one of the top assets at the club. And a year ago, we were on this podcast talking about the decision Manchester United had to make as to whether they would cash in on Rashford or whether they would retain him. Now they're in a position where everyone knows that Rashford wants to leave. Everyone knows that Ruben Amorim doesn't want Rashford in the squad anymore. They loaned him to another Premier League club, Aston Villa, for the second half of last season, and put an option to buy of £40 million on the player's head, so people know what the price is, which is way below what they could have achieved a year ago. And they've got Rashford saying he wants to play for Barcelona, who are in the process of signing Nico Williams as a left winger, which is his preferred position. So you have Rashford saying that he would be happy to play number 9 for Barcelona. Barcelona obviously look at that situation. They see, well, Rashford wants to come to us. He doesn't seem to have any other good options at present. So we'll just get the cheapest deal possible for him from Manchester United if we decide to go down that line. And there's a big if on whether they decide to go down that line. So they are facing a position where they could end up having to loan him to Barcelona with an option to buy, possibly even subsidise some of the wages. So that's a bit of recruitment or squad handling, which has been very suboptimally handled. Then you look at Alejandro Garnacho, who in the past week allowed himself to be photographed wearing Rashford's Aston Villa shirt to the upset of many at Old Trafford. Garnacho, you don't have to go all that long back to discussions of how Garnacho was going to be the new Cristiano Ronaldo, and his next move would be to Real Madrid. Manchester United would have to ensure that he didn't go to Real Madrid because he was such a talent that Madrid would be chasing him a few years down the line. Now you have Garnacho for sale. Manchester United facing having to reduce their 70 million asking price again, because everyone in the market knows he's for sale, and they know that Ruben Amorim has placed him in a position where he's effectively forced him out of the club by telling him to find another club in front of his teammates. The mishandling on the outgoings tells you that if you're negotiating with them, they're probably going to mishandle the purchase, and you can probably find a way to exploit them. Another example in here, which we should mention, is Alvaro Carreras, the Spanish left back who United allowed to join Benfica in January 2024 on loan, with a €6 million option to buy, which also included 3 million of performance-related bonuses. He is probably going to move to Real Madrid. Real Madrid are pushing very hard to sign him in this window. They tried to get him in before the Club World Cup. Benfica will sell, and they expect that fee to be around €50 million. So that's a player who looks like he's going to go to the biggest club in world football for the best part of 10 times what Manchester United allowed him to leave for 18 months ago. And Manchester United don't have two starting left backs at present. They've got one guy that they can really rely on for that position, and realistically, they probably need to reinforce at left back themselves. And here's one of the players that they had in-house not that long ago, about to go to Real Madrid, with most of the money for that player going to Benfica.
Yeah, it's just kind of blunder after blunder for Man United at the moment, coming in, going out. And if you look at some of the players that they signed last summer, maybe they haven't lived up to the hype, or injury has been a problem for some of them, obviously. But even seeing kind of Rasmus Højlund being tipped with moved away, or Joshua Zirkzee tipped being moved away, and you're getting these players that are meant to be the future of the club. The talk of they would no longer be at the club, and you mentioned Garnacho, and yeah, he, like you said, he was the next Cristiano Ronaldo, and now he's on the scrap heap essentially. They're dumping him, and everybody knows, and it's not a great way to be selling players. It's the exact opposite of the way Brentford are holding out for what they want. Man United are like, here, take them. We don't really want them, and here we might actually make the deal a bit better for you. And that's what it seems like they're going to have to do for Marcus Rashford, because his wages are so high and he has no future at Manchester United.
Yeah, and so many positions still to fill. If they get Mbeumo to add to Cunha, they still don't have a number 9, reliable number 9. And Mbeumo's preferred position is to play off to the right. He can play as a centre forward, but it'll be interesting if they decide to bring him in to convert him to be permanent number 9. Doesn't seem optimal there. Looking at goalkeeper, if they can sell Andre Onana, they need a midfielder. You have to think that they've got to bring in a top quality centre back to fit Amorim's system. He plays with 3 centre backs. He needs centre backs who can pass the ball well over long distance. And the current cohort, just as we've seen, aren't capable of defending effectively in that system. Some of them I don't think are capable of defending effectively in any system. But there are so many upgrades still to be done in that squad, and a lot of further tests of the quality of the negotiating and the recruitment team.
Yeah, it's a bit like the other big team that wear red in sport at the moment. They keep promising upgrades, but they never deliver. Ferrari in Formula 1, Lewis Hamilton, week after week, race after race, he seems to complain about the car, and it's not good enough, and it's not what he wanted. So yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton might be the Bruno Fernandes of Formula 1 at the moment. He's the only one that he's better than the material around him at the moment. Yeah. We mentioned obviously Thomas Frank moving to Tottenham, and yeah, the Thomas Frank's Tottenham era seems to be starting brightly with the moves they're making in the market, and it seems maybe onwards and upwards, especially as the Premier League table might reflect this season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see if Tottenham can finally get it right with one of these biannual overhauls of not just the coaching staff but the support staff. They sacked Ange Postecoglou after winning Europa League. They sacked Chief Football Officer Scott Munn after a 2-year period there. Director of Football Johan Lang has been retained. There's a sense within the game that one of the key reasons why he's been retained is because of his strong personal and past working relationship with Thomas Frank. You have Fabio Paratici is now about to complete his 30-month ban from official activity in the transfer market. He has been advising Tottenham in the background during that period, so he could be brought back in as managing director of football if they want to formally do that. Daniel Levy talking about Thomas Frank in this kind of ebullient interview that he gave with new chief executive Vinay Venkatesham, who used to be at Arsenal, kind of emphasised some interesting characteristics. Is one of the things that stood out to me with Thomas: clearly highly intelligent, great communicator, superhuman being, plus all the other technical aspects that are obviously important. I think that's right about Thomas Frank and those positives, but I think he might be a little concerned that the focus from Levy was so much on human characteristics and intelligence and communication rather than on those specific technical aspects of being a coach. And I think that you can see why Frank took so many of his assistants with him, because of that team mentality, team organisational mentality that Brentford had, and we talked about earlier in the podcast. The question mark is how much of that gets transferred and how much of that can be replicated at Tottenham, because we know from the way that Daniel Levy behaves that there will come a time where there will be conflict between Frank and Levy over matters of recruitment, principally, but also probably of the team, and how it goes when they get to that stage. They are focusing on younger players again. They have a couple of deals already done or very close to being done, and they've managed to negotiate down Matthias Tell's 55 million option to buy from Bayern Munich after a half season on loan to 35 million euros plus 10 million of bonuses, which is obviously something that will delight Daniel Levy. And they have agreed a billion yen, Juoku-en, as they say in Japan, a record deal for Japanese national team centre-back Kota Takai, who's come in from Kawasaki Frontale, one of the teams that have been probably the most successful producers of talent from the J-League to move to European football in recent years. That translates as just over £5 million. Kota is a tall, 1.92 metre centre-back, not particularly quick, but an excellent winner of the ball and scores goals from set pieces. Told by a friend who covers J-League football, but actually is a supporter of Kawasaki Frontale, has been for a long time. He thinks there's every chance that Kota can grow into being a Premier League defender, and he says that an interesting point that the J-League's policy of permitting more fouls than they used to. Certainly when I covered the J-League when I started as a sports journalist, it was quite hard not to get a foul from physical contact. The J-League's changed that, and that's proved a good preparation for Japanese players moving to Europe, and particularly to England and Scotland, where a number have done well in recent years. So interesting to see how Kota does in his Tottenham career. Obviously that interest in Mbeumo that we've talked about. For that right wing position, they're looking as well as Antoine Semenyo of Bournemouth, who is one of the fastest wingers in the Premier League, coming off the back of an exceptional season for the club and playing both off the wing and as a central striker. I think that's going to be a difficult deal to do given the amount of money that Bournemouth have already taken in. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the podcast. And it looks like asking price could be as much as £70 million for Semenyo. And also some discussion about Tottenham moving for Eberechi Eze of Crystal Palace. Again, an elite performer in the Premier League. SciSports estimated transfer value of €62.7 million. 8 goals and 8 assists in 34 Premier League games last season. I think, again, a super tough deal to do. You're negotiating with Steve Parish, who rarely lets players go under value. And Crystal Palace now in European football, and Parish, I think, celebrating finally managing to get John Textor out of the club, and having managed to replace him with New York Jets owner Woody Johnson in a deal that values the club at well over £400 million and allows Parish to continue this incredible position where he barely owns any of the club, a very small percentage of the shareholding, but has effective total control over the running of the football club.
That is definitely what he needs to be doing, having watched the New York Jets fail time after time to even make the playoffs in the NFL. Never mind win the Super Bowl. The New York Jets is probably the worst managed team in NFL, I would say. And even getting Aaron Rodgers in, that proved to be a disaster. He was injured. He was, 1 quarter into his Jets career. So yeah, everything they do seems to be an absolute disaster at the Jets. So the more Woody Johnson can stay away from Crystal Palace, the better.
Just take the money.
That's my advice to anyone dealing with billionaires and millionaires. Just take the money. Yeah. Just take the money. Yeah. Just don't let them do anything. Take the money and don't let them do it. Another team who is trying to get teams to take their money but doesn't seem to be offering enough money is Newcastle United. They've obviously put a big transfer fee on Alexander Isak. They don't want to sell him, but they want to try and save money elsewhere in the bids that they're making, and they haven't brought in anybody yet. So yeah, we're still waiting for Newcastle to make some moves in the market.
Yeah, Isak, they're talking about giving him a new contract to make him the highest paid player at the club, and to continue to fend off interest from the top teams in Europe, and a striker who's turned out to be an excellent signing and one of the most dangerous, capable forwards in the Premier League. But yeah, we had a few questions from Newcastle supporters about what's going on there, and I think they're understandably impatient, given that the last time Newcastle United signed a first team starter was August 2023, and Tino Livramento, again an astute deal, paid high money to Southampton for him, but he's turned into a very effective Premier League performer who other clubs would like to take if they had the opportunity. Lost Paul Mitchell as sporting director. Paul Mitchell lost that war. He kind of started with Eddie Howe last summer, which we talked about in the podcast at the time. Eddie Howe has now managed to have Andy Howe, his relative, take over recruitment in tandem with Steve.
How has he managed that?
I wonder. In tandem with Steve Nixon, who's a long-time member of the recruitment team at Newcastle United and highly regarded across the sport in terms of his ability to assess and find talent. I don't think the problem has been finding targets for Newcastle United or knowing where they need to strengthen. It's been getting the money down to convince selling clubs that it's the best deal. I mean, they made a real mess of trying to sign Mark Gehi last summer from Crystal Palace. Again, dealing with Steve Parish, tough guy to work with if you don't get your strategy exactly right. But this summer, they have made an offer for Anthony Elanga at Nottingham Forest, understood to be around £45 million. Forest have turned that down, way below their evaluation of the player. Elanga, they tried to sign on deadline day last summer from Forest and were turned down. Another player they're looking at for that right attacking position is João Pedro from Brighton. And there have been discussions with Brighton overtaking the Brazilian forward, who has an estimated transfer value of €61.2 million. Believe that Newcastle are looking at about £50 million for the player. They liked Mbeumo, but Manchester United, I think, have gone above where they're ready to go for the player. They like Semenyo. Again, the pricing looks really high there. And there's kind of been a bit of noise from the Newcastle United end that it's unfair, the pricing in the market, because Manchester United have paid so much for Cunha and have bid such a high level for Mbeumo, and they feel that those prices are overboard. And then the players they're trying to take in as alternatives from other clubs, they're hearing those clubs say, well, Manchester United paid 62.5 for Cunha, so we expect something around that figure for Elanga and João Pedro. That's the way clubs operate, I'm afraid. There's no point complaining about it, because that is a standard tactic in the market at present, is to benchmark off a similar player who's moved to the Premier League, going to another Premier League club and say that's the current valuation in the market, and if you're not prepared to meet it, we're not prepared to sell to you. Another position which is important to them is goalkeeper. And again, we're looking at the repeat story on last summer. We talked in this podcast multiple times about how Newcastle United wanted James Trafford from Burnley, and how they were underbidding on Burnley's expectation for the player, which was £30 million, which Newcastle were informed of from the very beginning, and which Newcastle failed to get to. They got to a situation where they asked Trafford to force his exit, and I can tell you Trafford had a meeting with Burnley chairman Alan Pace in which he asked to be allowed to leave to join Newcastle United, and Pace told him that he could go, but only if Newcastle paid the money that Burnley valued him at. Obviously that deal didn't happen. Trafford became a central figure in Burnley's promotion back to the Premier League, putting together a spectacular season from a statistical perspective. At one point, he had 12 clean sheets in a row. He was the Championship Player of the Month in January. He had 29 clean sheets in total, which equalled the record for a goalkeeper in a single season in English football, and conceded just 16 league goals over the whole campaign, which will tell you that if you want to get him out of Burnley this summer, it's going to cost still more money to sign him. But that interest in Trafford kind of precedes Paul Mitchell's period. It's continued beyond it. And it's such that Newcastle currently have 5 senior goalkeepers on their books, but they still are moving to try and make that deal happen. So I guess the answer to Newcastle United fans is yes, there is work being done. Eddie Howe pushing to have at least a couple of players in before pre-season training starts on 7th of July. But at present, Newcastle just aren't meeting the expectations of the market in terms of asking prices, and look, they're in a difficult position in the sense that they have that Saudi Arabia ownership from the Public Investment Fund, who also own the 4 biggest clubs in Saudi Arabia. Everyone in football knows how much money PIF have been putting into football. They can see them advertising at the Club World Cup, partly because they helped fund the television deal, which allowed the Club World Cup to go ahead with the prize money that convinced the European clubs to come. And therefore the expectation is Newcastle United should be able to spend at similar levels to the Saudi clubs, but PIF do not want to do that. PSR is being used as the reason for not doing that, and Newcastle have had PSR problems for quite a while. But also there is a reluctance, I'm told, from the Saudis to push the same levels of money into Newcastle United, and as things stand in the English game, and they are trying to get these deals at what they believe are correct valuations, but which the selling clubs do not believe are correct valuations.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Saudi aspect of it, because it seemed ironic there that Newcastle were trying to lowball teams when we had seen the Saudi Pro League spend so much money a couple of summers ago, and it seemed kind of at odds with each other. But obviously PSR is a key factor, and the Saudi clubs don't have the same kind of problems to balance the books as a Premier League club needs. So yeah, I'd say it's probably frustrating for Newcastle fans at the moment, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully for them. Some new players will be coming in this summer.
Let's just update on Bournemouth. Obviously, they have added that second sale that we've talked about for some weeks. It's been formalised now. Milos Kerkez to Liverpool. Kerkez been pushing for that move for over a year. And Bournemouth, the information I have from their side is that the transfer fee they agreed is worth up to £50 million. So considerably higher than the £40 million that's been generally reported about that deal. They say up to £50 million they'll get for the Hungary international. They are playing hardball on Ilya Zabarnyi, who Paris Saint-Germain have agreed personal terms with and are confident will come to the club. Paris Saint-Germain's latest offer is now at €55 million, which is substantial. But understand that Bournemouth are asking $70 million for the Ukraine defender. So that one, which seemed to be quite close to being concluded a week ago, is now looking more distant. Should also mention on the subject of Paris Saint-Germain, Gianluigi Donnarumma. We talked several weeks ago about the failure of Donnarumma and PSG to agree new contract terms and interest in Donnarumma from Internazionale. Donnarumma entering the final year of his contract, he's paid €10 million net on his present deal. Came from Milan under freedom of contract, which allowed him to get those substantial personal terms. Recently named the best goalkeeper in the world by CIES in terms of his performance over the past season, and an estimated transfer of €36.9 million. PSG and Donnarumma had another round of contract talks in the United States during the Club World Cup in the past couple of weeks. And there was no resolution to that other than the goalkeeper was given time to consider PSG's offer and asked to come back to them. The interesting thing here is that PSG, I understand, will not let the contract run down. If they do not get an agreement with Donnarumma in the summer, they will place him on the market and sell the goalkeeper rather than keep him for the final season and let him leave for nothing in terms of a transfer fee, in the same way as he left Milan to come to them. As was said, interest from Internazionale. There seems to be a degree of interest also from the two Manchester clubs in Donnarumma, which makes sense. Manchester United looking to upgrade in that position if they can offload Andre Onana. Ederson has been the subject of interest from Saudi Arabia and wanted to move to Saudi Arabia last summer, but Manchester City were not happy with the fee offered, and he ended up staying for another season. I think there's a possibility there that Ederson could move, and it would make sense that Donnarumma would be considered as a replacement if he doesn't come to an agreement with Paris Saint-Germain on a new contract. Paris Saint-Germain absolutely want to keep the player, but they say they will not overpay on salary, and they feel it is perfectly possible to replace with as good a goalkeeper should they be forced into a position of having to recruit a new one, and they feel they're a very attractive club to move to now, being European champions.
Yeah, and similarly, Donnarumma is a very attractive goalkeeper to sign or for PSG to sell this summer after his performances in Champions League. There was doubts in the past about maybe sometimes his consistency or his goalkeeping attributes, but we saw in the Champions League this season that he was one of the best goalkeepers in the world, or he proved it in the matches he played for PSG in the Champions League. And if they were to sell him, this is the time to sell and maximise the revenue they can get for him.
Yeah, he definitely improved last season, and one of the key elements in which he improved, which is important if he's going to move to English football, is in his aerial play. And that's something that PSG worked on. They spent a lot of time with Donnarumma to make him more assertive in the penalty area, to make him more confident about attacking aerial balls. And we saw it. We saw the value of it. They played English team after English team in that run to the final, and he was the outstanding performer in a couple of those games, particularly against Liverpool and Arsenal.
Yeah, so it would be a good move for Premier League clubs to sign him, because they know that he can do the job against those Premier League clubs. They could do it against the rivals. So yeah, he might be a big upgrade on Andre Onana for Manchester United.
Super expensive deal if they were to go down that line. You must underline that will be a difficult one for them to do. I suspect they are looking at Donnarumma in the perspective of they see his contract is running down, and the hope would be that they could convince him to run it down and come to them for free in a year's time.
We end the show with a hero and villain of the week, and I think Duncan has switched things up and is going for the hero this week after picking the villain last week.
It's a hero with a big element of villain attached to it. That's why
my favourite type of hero.
The hero, unquestionable hero, is Fede Valverde, who in his first 2 full appearances for Real Madrid in the Club World Cup, he made his 3rd appearance in the early hours of this morning. The Uruguayan midfielder went over 100 hours of play in the 2024-25 season, surpassing Bruno Fernandes's 5,876 minutes for Manchester United in Portugal to be the player who's put the most minutes in from the biggest leagues in the world, between league football, European football and international football over the past season. And the villain element, obviously, why are the players having to play this much football? Well, it's because of that Club World Cup, because of the expanded Champions League, because of the authorities' refusal to take players' fitness and quality into account when they add more and more competitions to the calendar.
Yeah, so similarly, my villain, I was thinking maybe Ruud van Nistelrooy might be an option, or Leicester, for finally sacking him after weeks and months of speculation. We kind of waited for it to happen, but I'm not going for that. I kind of lean into what you've said, and the villain of the week will be the Premier League, because they released the fixtures for next season, which is great for away fans and travelling fans and trying to make plans and stuff like that, and especially fans coming from overseas, that can make plans on when they might get to see their club and when you can see. But considering the Club World Cup is still the 24-25 season, isn't it too early to be starting the 25-26 season? It's meant to be the summer. We're meant to have some time off. It's meant to be just transfers and not actual matches and fixtures and next season's Premier League. Can we just have a break from football for 5 minutes, please?
You're a football journalist, Ronan. You're not supposed to ask for breaks from football. No holidays ever.
I am. I want holidays. I want to spend time with my family. Doesn't everybody else want to spend time? We had some nice weather. There was a heat wave across Europe this week. Doesn't everyone just want to go out and enjoy the sunshine and maybe play football in your garden rather than watching millionaires try to win $1 billion in America at midnight or whatever it is going on at the moment? No, thank you. Less football, please. Less football. So as well as heroes and villains, we also have you, our listeners, being heroes by filling in our audience survey. The link is in the show notes as always, and on comments in our social media platforms, etc. It really helps us give you more of what you want and less of what you don't want. And hopefully more of what you want is more like today's excellent episode. As well as that, at the start of the show, we mentioned that we launched YouTube memberships. So if you want to sign up and become a member to our YouTube channel, please do. We would love it. If you haven't subscribed already, do subscribe as well, because the more subscribers, the better. We can give you the content you want when you want and be notified of it. As well as that, Football Transfers has an app which you can get the transfers content direct to your phone without having to click into their website, get push notifications for the latest transfers, etc. So please do and download and do all of those if you can. So thanks very much for everything today, Duncan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for the podcast, and thanks for hosting again, Ronan.
More than welcome. You've been listening to the Transfers podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. Please follow, share and rate us. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter, Blue Sky and TikTok addresses at TransfersCast. I'm on Twitter at SwearI'mNotPaul, on Blue Sky at Ronan Murphy. Duncan is at Duncan Castles everywhere. Our production is by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production, and our music is by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.
We did the transfer window. He and McGarry, who left us and was alone for a couple of years. Duncan was old. Now he's back with a new show. It's called The Transfers. It's where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. 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 Where everyone's gonna go.